Now, one of the world's most important climate conferences has formally opened today in Brazil. World leaders and climate activists are gathering in the northern Brazilian port city of Belém, which is often referred to as the gateway to the Amazon, to discuss ways of limiting temperature rises to 1.5 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial levels. One leader who won't be there is Donald Trump, a man who has been a long-time climate change skeptic. Correspondents say that given that the leaders of the world's biggest emitting nations are not at the COP conference and President Trump has called climate change a con job, those who want climate action have a massive mountain to climb.
But I'm not sugarcoating it. We have so much more work to do. We must move much, much faster on both reductions of emissions and strengthening resilience. The science is clear. We can and must bring temperatures back down to 1.5 degrees Celsius after any temporary overshoot. Lamenting is not a strategy. We need solutions.
So, yet another climate tempest potentially on the horizon. What might this mean for Nigeria, Africa, and the world? Well, Professor Chukwumerije Okereke is one of Nigeria's foremost international climatologists. He's a globally recognized scholar on environmental policy and climate change, and is a UN scientist who served as co-director of the Center for Climate and Justice in the UK. He's also a member of the UN body known as the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. And he joins me now on the line from Brazil. Thank you very much indeed for joining us on a day that clearly is a busy one for you. So given that the US and I understand the leaders of China and India won't be there, what is Cop30 likely to achieve? Can it overcome such political difficulties?
Thank you, Charles. It's a very difficult political situation. China and Brazil combined account for a significant amount of global emissions. And to not have China and China and US attending this COP30 is a major, major disappointment. But I can tell you here in Brazil and Belém that the optimism remains very, very high. There is a sense that the countries that are here will band together and do all they can to ensure that the process is not altogether completely derailed. And so I see a lot of buzz around here, a lot of optimism, but everybody also says how disappointing it is that China and for sure US won't be in the room. These are the countries that have contributed the most in terms of causing climate harm. And Africa and other developing countries have the right to expect these countries to step up and help both in technology and finance. So it's extremely disappointing that these countries are not here to take responsibility.
Indeed, I've heard that echoed in the chambers there. But I mean, do other nations now need to work harder when it comes to reducing their carbon emissions to make up for the increased likely emissions from the US and China?
Well, the answer is yes, but also the other narrative that is very strong around the corridors is that actually the fact that the US and China leadership are not here does not mean that those countries are not doing anything about climate change. We've heard from governors after governors from the US ratcheting up their pledges and promising to do all they can to drive down emissions and move towards low carbon economies in their jurisdiction. And we also know that China continues to invest massively in critical minerals and electric vehicles, but also that emissions are beginning for the first time in China to come down rapidly. And so what I say to other countries is, don't be fooled by the fact that these two big leaders are not in the room. The train has already left the station. There might be a momentary loss of momentum, but to go on and just say that you're going to invest as much as you want in fossil fuel will not be a good strategy in the long term. Many years ago, when US left Kyoto, we saw that some states, such as California, really rose up to the plate and became one of the leaders in climate action. And today, California is generating a lot more, energy from renewable than many parts of the world, and they become one of the leaders in terms of clean technology. And so, I don't see that the hope is completely lost. The momentum remains high, but yes, it is a bit of a pause, not a full stop in the climate diplomacy journey.
Isn't there a big problem, though, Prof, if the US continues to charge ahead of other economies? I mean, won't other nations look at that and say, maybe we need to drill, baby drill, like the US, to ensure that their economies thrive?
I would be lying if I say that I have not picked up that sentiment from some nations. But I have also seen many other world leaders, including those that derive a lot of their physical revenues from oil, recognizing the fact that what is happening in the US is temporary. Let's bring it home to Nigeria. Of course, 80% or so of our fiscal revenue come from oil. But we'll see that the Nigerian government have recently submitted a very strong NDC 3.0, launched the carbon market framework, finished the writing of their just transition plan, and are making rapid progress towards green industrialization. And I think this is the right thing to do, not to say because US is, dropping the ball, as it were, that we can just go on drilling. Whatever is happening in US is temporary. And, Donald Trump is not going to be the US president forever. So you could very well see a cycle next, election, a US that is going to make rapid progress and leave you behind. So we shouldn't, take too closely to the US approach. We should be thinking strategically about our own economy and how to diversify and ensure that we're not left behind in the green transition program.
Well, let's pick it up from the way that you put it there, because looking at the poorer nations, for instance, in Africa, the Caribbean, etc., those nations that feel the effects of climate change the most, what can they hope to get from this COP meeting from the richer countries?
Well, that's a very good question, and that's what is uppermost in most people's mind in the corridors here and in the meeting rooms. You will recall that Cop29, there was a lot of furore, a lot of shenaniganism about the amount of money that are due developing countries. In the end, it was agreed about 300 billion per annum by 2035 or so, although some people thought that 1.3 trillion was more appropriate. Now, what most poor countries are expecting in this COP is so much clarity about where that money is going to come from. So I expect to see some pledges from the World Bank, from GEF, from GFC, and other, donor countries, and to get a bit clearer sense of how that money is going to come and from where it will come and who is going to get the money. So poor countries are expecting much more clarity in terms of the flow of finance. That's for sure. The other thing that may come out here for forest countries is a forest facility. We are meeting here in the middle of the Amazon, as it were. Brazil has been very, very clear that they want some kind of forest facilities. If that money eventuates, then countries like Nigeria, Zimbabwe, Gambia, and other forest nations could well be in a position to receive significant amount of money to help in forest conservation. So, and then, of course, the issue of loss and damage, how to put more money in that pot to ensure that countries who are devastated by flooding, hurricane, and other extra weather events has enough money or assistance to be able to recover quickly. So those are some of the areas where significant effort can be made here in Bela.
And we've heard the UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres talking about the rise in global temperatures overshooting the 1.5 degree centigrade increase from pre-industrial levels, saying that it is likely that temperatures could rise by 2.3 degrees. I mean, what would that mean for a country like Nigeria?
Absolutely devastating. Already, we are seeing unprecedented level of flooding events in Nigeria. Drought is epic. Heat wave is killing people in hundreds of thousands around the world, and tropical countries like Nigeria are bearing the greatest brunt. If we allow temperature to continue to climb in the order of numbers that we have heard today from the UN Secretary General, then it will be calamitous for countries like Nigeria. And that's why it's important that we don't fall into this, booby trap of drill, baby, drill. We need to realize that if we go all out in search of fossil fuel, it will still be vulnerable countries like Nigeria that will bear the greatest brunt of climate change. So it's not in our interest to, goad the idea that we can just continue drilling and exploring fossil fuel. Of course, I do agree that we have to bridge through gas and do what is necessary in the short to medium term, but we still also need a green economy strategy to diversify our economy away from fossil fuel. And that's why I'm happy that we have a very strong delegation from Nigeria, making strong argument, putting strong, solid reports. But I hope that all those strong reports and arguments will translate into tangible outcome for my country and the rest of Africa.
Prof, I want to thank you very much indeed for your analysis there. Professor Chukwumerije Okereke is one of Nigeria's foremost international climatologists. He's a globally recognized scholar on environmental policy and climate change, and is also a member of the UN body known as the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. And he was talking to me on the line there from Belém in Brazil. Thank you very much indeed.